From juveniles to older horses, sprinters to stayers, it's the spring all the way through to the autumn. This is the Flat Pack. Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Flat Pack, brought to you from the Art Deco bunker that is the Box in Leeds. My name is Ross Brierley, and over the next few months we're going to be taking a step back in the midweek to let the dust settle and see what happened from the weekend's action, and then start to take a little bit of a peer ahead to what might develop at the weekend as well. Like I said, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, older horses, sprinters, stayers, middle distance animals. We've got handicaps, Group 1s, we've even got a valuable seller at York this weekend. The flat season has something for everyone, and we will be delving in to find the form lines and the bloodlines, to find the most interesting angles throughout the year. So thank you for joining us for this first one. We hope that you keep coming back. Currently it's not particularly interactive, of course, because you didn't know this existed, but now that it does, please get your comments in at the bottom and tell us what you want to see, and ask any questions as well. Like I said, we're going to be getting stuck in to the interesting angles, and I say I better introduce the team, because it's not just me babbling to myself in this oak bunker. I am joined by two of the finest names in and around the rhubarb triangle. That's right, it is Edinburgh's finest export, currently residing in Huddersfield. It's Racing Post betting editor, Keith Melrose.
Hi Ross, how are you?
I'm all right, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, obviously a good week to have. Just got through all Epsom and ready for Ascot now.
Yeah, absolutely. The flat season, I mean, admittedly, we should have started this show, well, I don't know, after the Lincoln. I mean, the next few episodes would have been pretty dull, wouldn't they?
Scottish National Week. You wouldn't have got me on the flat pack in Scottish National Week. But it starts from basically the Guineas, doesn't it? And it all kicks off from there. So we're five weeks in, really, and we're just getting to that point where we've stopped talking about projections and started talking about actual form lines, which is a bit where we like to get our teeth in, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole point of the show is, of course, like I said, it's not necessarily a tipping show, and it's certainly not, trying to make snap judgments as the race just finished. So hopefully we can try and find some interesting angles and things that catch our eye throughout the season. Because, like I said, I do think the flat season gets a bit of a short shrift in that regard. It's easy in the jump season because you've got 4 or 5 races for each grade, which have 1 or 2 runners throughout the winter, and then they all turn up in the spring, and then bang, it's over. But the flat, you kind of end up having to peak 3 or 4 times throughout the year.
Yeah, and you pick the big super stables, pick the horses that are going to peak early, they pick the horses that are going to peak late, and there's so much more reading, it's so much more of an intricate game, and it's really rewarding when you get it right. Yeah, the jump season, you've got Cheltenham, but spoiler alert from October, isn't it? Whereas the flat season, there's a lot more reward there if you can just peel back the surface a little bit. Yeah,
well, fingers crossed we can. You may have noticed from that shot there with Keith, there's a man sat very quietly, very still next to him. It's a very expensive cardboard cutout of the one and only Mr. Matt Gardner. How you doing, Matt?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Ross. Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to the this beautiful, sweaty Art Deco bunker.
Thanks very much.
This is what you dreamed about when you joined the post, isn't it?
It was high up there, yeah.
When I emailed you about this, you were chomping at the bit, because I think I get the feeling most of your colleagues are national hunt focused, and you've got no one else to talk to up here, have you?
No, I'm just talking to myself in my office. That's about as far as I get. Like you said, the flat season isn't what a lot of people focus on, but there's a lot of intrigue over a long period of time, and we do have that kind of end of season target, Champions Day, Arc and stuff, but there's so much more in between, the steps between where we are now and the end of that season, than you necessarily get in the jump season. So loads to talk about. Yeah, and we're well and truly underway now. You're handicapping the juveniles this year, is that right? Yes. Yep.
So you're starting to, and again, they are a microcosm of the flat season. You've got those early speedy types. Then you've got horses. I mean, we're talking about this week, the first 7 furlong race for 2-year-olds, and then you get to the autumn races. We've just seen Desert Crown win a Derby. Back end of last season, you're thinking, have we got something special at your Nottinghams or your Yarmouths? So your job must change as the season progresses.
Yeah, from start to finish, it is very different. You go from kind of 5 furlong speedsters that are probably not going to be anything more than that to, like you say, future middle distance and maybe even staying types that come out at the back end, and you're thinking sort of classics or Group 1s for the following season. So it does change very much from early season to end of season.
Yeah. Or of course you're thinking, which name will they be running under in Hong Kong in 8 months' time?
There is that as well. Yeah, it could be.
As I was looking back at last year's Britannia form and thinking, oh, interesting. That's what they've gone with for that Ger Lions export. Because the flat seat is a global thing. But the national hunt is a little bit myopic, isn't it? It's a bit kind of focused on this country.
It's 3 countries and forget the rest, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the national hunt. So it's a far more international game, definitely.
Yeah, which is what makes it so complex.
Yes, it is, because you've got Dubai in March, and then you've got, after the season finishes here in Europe, you've got Hong Kong and whatnot. So it makes it, in terms of where you pick your horse, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not a straightforward choice, is it?
No.
Paul Nicholls looks clever for picking horses for Aintree.
Yeah.
And that's seen as different over jumps, whereas here in the flat it's totally different.
Yeah, you get a 2-year-old and think, well, you know what, we're going to go for heavy ground, Saint-Cloud, back into the season. You go, what? But anyway, that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to hear for on the flat pack. We start every week with one lesson learned, because like I said, this isn't about, sure, we're experts, but we're always learning in this game. The moment you think you've got it cracked is the moment that you pretty much have to give up. So each week, one lesson learned from the week's racing, and hopefully we can learn them and then forget them again over the winter and learn them once again when we come back for the spring next year. So, Keith, I'll start with you. We've just had Epsom, of course, last weekend. What have you learned from the past 7 days of flat racing?
And you've got to practice what you preach a little bit with specialisations. So I'm doing more of the sprinters this year, is where I'm specialising. But last week, I spent 6-8 hours, basically a day looking at the Derby. Lucky boy that I am, that's for work.
It wasn't like in the evening when your missus was asking you to come to bed. It was a whole...
It was that too, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It was work time during the day. And even though I was sitting there on Thursday going, give me the dash to preview, give me that race at Mr. Wagyu one, nom sprints for me.
Is that what you say, is it?
No, it's not what I said at all, but I was just trying to make it sound exciting. This is the whole point. This is why we're here.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I won quite well in the Derby, but I gave it all back with my sprint bets. So you've got to, even though we say we specialise, it's where you spend the time.
Yeah.
That's where it pays itself back. Last week, because of a quirk of work in the calendar, I spent most of my time on the Derby, and lo and behold, even though I say I'm doing sprints this year, there's a Derby I knew about.
Yeah. Nom. Sprints for me. That's the bit we're clipping out, absolutely. Okay, so Keith's learned that when he says he needs to specialise, he should listen to his own advice. Again, because those lessons, if we could learn them straight off the bat, we wouldn't be sat here, would we? We'd be pretty rich, I reckon, because you just keep doing the thing right every time. But what have you learned, Matt, for the past week?
Mine's a horse-specific lesson, I suppose, in that Homeless Songs is probably really, really good. She looked pretty good winning that 1,000 Guineas. But obviously Tuesday coming out and winning the Oaks, I like Tuesday for that, and she always looked more of an Oaks filly. But Homeless Songs, you go back and watch it, and she made Tuesday look like an absolute tractor, just like different gears, you know.
That's an official Racing Post analysis, isn't it? An absolute tractor.
That is in there, yeah.
We've got little menus now to select, and it's right at the bottom. Absolute tractor.
Do you have one of each? You've kind of got like you can have a
proper one on that one.
Yeah.
But I mean,
proper horses down at the bottom of the list as well. Proper horse, absolute tractor. Yeah.
For the
got to know where to look.
Patreon subscribers, Patreon subscribers get the actual Racing Post analysis that goes on behind the scenes.
But yeah, and I think that's sort of a more general point is that early 3-year-old campaign, we are still quite formative in these horses' careers, and we're learning all of the time about kind of their ceiling, their floor, all that sort of thing. And for me, what Tuesday did in that Oaks raised Homeless Song's ceiling, and without her running, obviously. So, potentially a really, really good filly.
Again, which is, I mean, people like, I don't want to keep comparing it to the jump season, but people like the jump season because almost the same horses come back and they have the same targets, and it's familiar, and you often get rivalries reborn every season. The flat season doesn't have that, which people use it as a reason to detract from it. However, what I think it does have is those parameters are wider, so you can kind of go, oh, that was impressive, but you don't quite know how impressive they could be, and by the end of the season, you could be like, well, you know, when it won that Group 3 by a couple of lengths, I didn't realise it could do this in 6 months' time, and that's the kind of feel you get with your Homeless Songs, for example.
I think quite a good way of thinking about it is when you see NFL players coming into the draft, people talk about players' ceilings quite a lot and how good they could they be relative to how they are. It's quite fluid, and that's the way I think about flat horses. Is what are the clues that we've got already to tell me how good this horse could be, and then kind of substantiating that with form ideas and all that sort of thing as well.
It speaks to a lot of the classics we've seen so far. Vadeni, who won the French Superior Jockey Club on Sunday, you don't see that race won like that very often, but partly it was because the race was slightly better run than normal. They were really strung out. But we know he's a good horse, we know she's a good horse, we know that Crown's a good horse, but at this point we still don't know how good, because we can't tell what's behind. So much.
Well, that's the thing. It's how good are the winners going to be based, and then also how good are the ones in behind, and then it all.
You had a lovely fact earlier about the Derby.
Say that again.
The Derby in recent Derby that's had the most Group 1 winners in it.
Yeah, the recent Derby that has the most Group 1 winners is Wings of Eagles.
Incredible, isn't it?
Which has thrown up. There was Cracksman in there. Best Solution won 3 Group 1s.
You see. Melbourne Cup winner.
Rekindling was beaten outside with the Melbourne Cup. That is because I went back to look at the speed figures of the Derby, and I was shocked by how that was top of my figures. And then when you go back into it, you think, that was a really good race. Capri won the Irish Derby, won the St Leger. So you never quite know. And even then, for example, when Golden Horn won the Derby or Australia, you look at those in behind, you think, not up to much, but very impressive winners. I struggle with the lesson. The problem is we've done 2 pilots of this, and I keep learning the same. I keep learning the same lessons.
3 weeks in, and we've already learnt the same lesson
repeatedly, over and over again. I think the lesson I learned from last week was that, which is the whole point of the show almost, is don't make snap judgments, which we'll get to into the Oaks a little bit in a second. But I was probably a bit too quick to say. Everyone sat around when you watch a race live, and we went, "Oh gosh, you would have won off the track, Emily Upjohn. God, desperately unlucky. Everything went wrong." And then when you watch back a race on replay, or you never watched it live to begin with, you get a very different feel for it because you've not got that whole build-up. You've not got the adrenaline pumping through your veins. You've got that cold, serial killer, analytical.
I didn't watch the Oaks live, and I sort of watched it and thought, "Oh, is that it?"
Yeah, they've made a meal out of this.
Exactly. It was overstated, and the same with what happened. We'll get to what happened in the Derby. Matt Chapman's job is to try and create drama, and he basically came out and said Westover would have won. But we'll get to in why a minute. That's Chapman's job. That's his job's not to tell you what's going to win, or be a good analyst and judge. It's to get reactions.
He's a hype man.
He is, and Rob Hornby thought he should have won the Derby. I watched ITV by chance on Saturday, and he really did think he should have won that race. But he's hardly an objective observer, is he?
No, quite the opposite, I'd say. So I think my lesson is always that you can get a better view of a race watching it in the cold light of day, away from all the hype, which I knew anyway, but I'm going to keep learning.
One day,
all these lessons will be learned. Now it's time for the reflections section, where we take a look back at the past 7 days or so of flat action. And with the dust settled, we put that cold-eyed analytical stare to the test and see what we can pull out of the big races. Of course, Epsom, very much the focus over the weekend. We nearly had 2 red-hot favourites go in. Desert Crown won doing Catherine Wheels. A sparkling performance, wasn't it, on the day on the Downs. But Emily Upjohn was beaten on the bob by Tuesday. And was she unlucky? Was she unfortunate? Should she have won? Could all those things be true at the same time? It depends whether you backed her, I guess. But Tuesday beat Emily Upjohn, Nashwa and Concert Hall, of course, in the Oaks. It was O'Brien and Gosden once again with their runners. And Desert Crown was very impressive, beating 2 so-called outsiders. Should one of them have turned the form around? They're all the questions that people are throwing around. I'm going to come to you first for this Matt, but because we don't want to talk about what everyone else talked about over the weekend. What an impressive winner, unfortunate, unlucky, because there are bigger factors at play, as there always are. It's never clean cut. It's always complicated. That's what makes it so fascinating. But one thing that did stand out was there was one big word for you that made a difference.
Pace. I think both races just underlined how key that is. I mean, we know it is in form analysis. People are always talking about the likely pace scenarios of races and all that sort of thing. So for me, the 2 things really, the pace of the race and also the horse having pace. So the Derby was well run, but for me, Desert Crown won that with pace. You look at Westover, he met trouble and all that sort of stuff, but Desert Crown the move from about the path, which is about 3¼ furlongs out, something like that.
3.5,
yeah, down to sort of the furlong pole. That was the key section. What he did after was kind of irrelevant. He'd won by that point with that turn of foot.
He'd switched gears there, hadn't he? And it'd be interesting to see. We'll talk about the ride in the Oaks as well, but I wonder whether that was part of the plan for Richard Kingscote. It was like, just give him the space to use that acceleration, because while everyone else was getting involved in the camber, it was almost as if there was a Hollywood director kind of going, right, the best place for you to be as you accelerate as a crowd is right there.
Yeah.
And he had that clean run.
It looked really good on that TV shot.
Yeah, didn't it?
Which helped, yeah. But we saw in the think back to the Dante, what he did was quicken off a good gallop, and that underpins your opinion of him being a really good horse. Horses that can quicken off a good pace, so well and good quickening when they've gone steady. That's a different kettle of fish. But so in terms of that, and in terms of the Oaks, there was the start. People talked a lot about that. They talked about Emily Upjohn kind of switching wide and all that sort of stuff. But really, again, Tuesday, I think it was something like 2-1 or something like that, furlongs. It was the turn of foot that she showed relative to Emily Upjohn that's been key in that race. So, yeah.
Because when we were previewing the race, breeding, sure, Tuesday looked like an Oaks filly, but she hadn't necessarily looked like it on the track, I didn't think, in the previous two starts, whereas maybe Concert Hall did a bit more. So it's interesting to see that it wasn't necessarily stamina, it was probably, like you said, pace and class maybe that got her out of it.
It was a really fast finish to that Oaks. And basically, Emily Upjohn, to be fair to her, she quickened up pretty well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But Tuesday just did it better, sharper. There might be a bit of experience there. Yeah. Maybe she's having a fifth start, but I kind of think running in 2 guineas is probably better preparation than a soft novice and a soft Musidora.
That's what he does though, Brian, isn't it? Even though he's got these fillies that are bred to win Oaks, he says, well, why not give them a go in classics first? That'll teach them something, won't it? And, Found was very much like that, wasn't she? She ran quite well in mile classics before really taking off over middle distances. And
to be fair, he's really good at getting inexperienced horses battle hardened.
Yeah, he does. And that's it. He used to run the inexperienced ones around Chester for that very reason. And he's always thinking about how to do that side. And she was one of those fillies, wasn't she? And we got obsessed. People got obsessed with who should have won that Oaks.
Yeah.
The point isn't that, because it was so steadily run, because they both had those really quick furlongs in there, isn't the main point of the Oaks that those are 2 really good fillies? Because that third was Nashwa. She's quite good.
Yeah.
It was a steady pace and he buried her. They're both really good.
Yeah. But potentially just really good in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that stuck me when I watched it again was Ryan Moore. Like, he got pelters last year, didn't he? For what people say, 2 bad rides at Epsom on well-fancied horses. And I thought he got it absolutely spot on Tuesday. He went through the gears at exactly the right point. And I remember saying, I think about a furlong and a half hours, like, Tuesday is bolted up here because he's got that perfect line. He had they hung over to this, or they all came over to this side, so he had the clean run of things. But it was the way you talk about jockeys having a clock in their head. I could almost feel it click. Go, right, now is the time to go. Whereas Frankie, I don't know whether it was the start or whether the position.
Was he conscious of what had happened at the start and was saving her a bit more?
Possibly, yeah. But it got. If you watch it back, and maybe the angle is a bit confusing there, but it felt like Ryan was like, right, I'm going to go and win my race here, and Frankie went, okay, right, now let's get ready. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to unleash her. And by that point, Ryan Moore had already kind of done his job.
I'm probably reading into this way too much. My impression was that Dettori maybe thought he was on a really good one.
Yeah.
Because he was sort of still holding on to her and all that.
You think he was showboating a bit?
Not showboating, but just thinking, I'm going to pick this up a little bit, what I would say about Emily Upjohn, I think Tuesday is potentially pretty good.
Yeah.
The fact that Emily Upjohn got so close, taking into account all of that, the run of the race, the start, the wide trip, everything, come the end of the season, I would be surprised if she wasn't a 2-3 length better filly.
Yeah. I mean, she is an ARC contender, genuinely.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing you want to mention, we talk about Westover, because when you watch that back, you think, well, hang on a minute. The third should have won this race.
Yeah, I watched it on ITV, and the way it cut there, they actually cut the angle to go from side on to the front on.
Yeah.
literally before Westover hit the wall, but got behind the wall of horses. So I was saying, I was watching it with my dad and I said, oh, it's Westover and Desert Crown coming through here. Then all of a sudden Westover isn't coming anymore. And I'm watching Desert Crown do what he did, because how can you not?
Yeah.
And then a furlong out, Westover comes again, and I thought he just stopped to nothing. But it turns out, obviously we saw that he'd got beaten in behind horses. And
he was doing that classic Epsom thing where you run into someone on the pavement and you both kind of
go
for the same way, and then suddenly you get the gap.
Exactly that. And even people were getting wound up about what he could do and, should he have won. But it's true. These two facts are true, and it's really quite strange. Yes, he was more than 2 3/4 lengths better than that result because of what he got held up, and that's how far he was beaten by Desert Crown. But that doesn't mean he was the best horse in the Derby, because how does Kingscote ride that last furlong? If Westover's still piling after him,
fair,
very different.
Yeah. Well, like Matt said, he'd won the race already, so...
Kingscote's thinking of the eclipse in that last furlong.
Yeah.
You know what? But he honestly is, because he's thinking, I don't need to give this horse... I've won the Derby. I don't need to give this any harder a race than is needed.
Or he's thinking of the photo he's going to frame. It's like, look casual, look.
He is a sort of look cool. So maybe, but he came across very well from that to Kingscote, I thought.
Yeah.
But it changes so much if Westover gets that run. Look, he's definitely more of an Irish Oaks type, Irish Derby type. He's going to love that big galloping track. Whether they decide for Ned to go and win the Ledger or not, I don't know. He's clearly a very good horse. But the idea that he'd have beaten Desert Crown on Saturday, it doesn't stack up, even though the facts say it does in front of you. It's one of those weird optical illusions almost.
But again, the joy is that we will find out.
Yeah, we're now talking about proper form, aren't we? We're now talking about, we're not just talking about, oh yes, but he hung right in the Dante, but he was beating Royal Patronage and all that kind of... Westover he plainly wasn't fit when he won at Sandown.
Yeah.
And he was still a bit of a big baby.
Yeah.
So we didn't know about him at all, and he showed us what he's about in that race. So now we've got actual form to talk about. This is when the season, you say we've missed the first 5 weeks, but now's when it gets really good. Because the Guineas is a bit of an end in itself, whereas Derby onwards and Hopes onwards, we're talking about how the season's going to unfold, and we've got actual tangible form lines to talk about.
In terms of the 3 Old Classics in general, obviously, because we saw so far, we've seen some pretty damn impressive performances, but like you said, it's how good...
Yeah,
they're good performances, but how good are the races? So obviously Verdani bolted up at the weekend as well, the Prix de Jockey Club. Desert Crown obviously wildly impressive. That perfect, like you said, that perfect kind of emotive, evocative Derby shot, which we haven't seen for a few years as well, where you're like, oh, a good horse in that position at Epsom.
I shouted at the telly when that happened.
I mean, rightly so.
It was a go on, you good horse.
Yeah.
Just as he go, we're seeing a good one here.
I've not had that reaction to a Derby winner for...
Yeah.
A good while anyway.
Workforce, I think, actually, for me.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I've had that reaction to a Derby winner. I've had, when I watch replays back of people go, oh, there's a good Derby winner, and you watch it back, you go, wow, that does look impressive. But almost in my kind of lifetime, I've been like, so when does this happen then? When do we get that Derby winner that gets you in the gut rather than the head? And it could well be that Desert Crown is that. But obviously you've got, Caribus and Native Trail. Tuesday versus Emily Upjohn is not necessarily an impressive winner, but certainly 2 very good horses. Above the Curve comes into it as well. Cachet, and then Homeless Songs, who... How many gears are left there?
I think there's a lot of... a lot of them are potentially very good. The one that I'm coldest on, I think, is Native Trail.
I think
And he was the one we were all expected to be the superstar.
And that's why the Guineas stands alone a little bit. There's that old... It's a bit of an old wives' tale that the Guineas is the last 2-year-old race, and it is hackneyed, but... It's not completely false either.
Yeah.
It's the sort of clash, isn't it? The kind of horses that it's their end game really early.
Exactly. Well, it is. Of course, it's their end game.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of viewing him now as like a less good Pinatubo, basically.
Wow.
In a way.
Put that on the advert in the racing post. Straight to the breeding sheds. A less good Pinatubo.
Matt Gardner.
Yeah. Similar type of horse, and just not impressed with him in Ireland at all.
The only thing I would say about Nature, which we'll get to a little bit later on at Ascot, is that, like I said, I still get the feeling that he's been consistently running at places that don't really suit him as a horse. So it would be interesting. I've always thought when you get to Ascot, we'll see the...
Yeah, he's absolutely best, isn't he?
I can see that, to be fair.
But we'll get to that a little bit later on, because it's Royal Ascot very soon. Other things to Other things to mention from last week, of course, we saw a wildly impressive Coronation Cup winner again, which is something we haven't said in a while, in the shape of Hookham. Unfortunately, by Hookham potentially crocked. Is that the headline? I don't know. That didn't really work. By Hookham, by crook is what I was going to go for.
Oh, okay, I get it now.
It's always good when you have to explain the points. Obviously, we've got Adyar, Hurricane Lane coming back, Bay Bridge throw into the mix, Ilarab stepping up as well, maybe. The middle distance potentially contenders. Obviously, when you bring the fillies into the back end of the season as well. Again, we don't know how good they are in historical context, but we've got a competitive bunch.
I think we've got some. What's quite exciting, we've got some unknowns. We've got Bae potentially stepping up in trip. You can see him being at least as good at 10 furlongs. The 3-year-olds that were still sort of tapping into their potential, when they start taking on the older horses, that's kind of, it's one of the really good things about the flat season, isn't it? That clash of generations. And because sometimes they almost get a bit exposed earlier in the season, and you're kind of thinking, well, the older horses have got it, or vice versa. Whereas at this point, you're thinking, I know you're a big Hurricane Lane fan, we've got some questions to answer that when they run against each other, hopefully we will get them answered.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is again with horse racing is a negative against the flat is that there are some of these horses where you think, wow, he's improving as a 5-year-old, and you think, yeah, of course, because
he's 5 ultimately,
this is when they should be. This should be their ultimate end game.
We don't talk about horse years in the same way we talk about dog years, do we? We possibly should.
Or 3, or in general.
Well, no, just as in like a 3-year-old horse. If you assume like horses live to about 30.
Yeah.
A 3-year-old's basically a teenager.
Yeah.
So why are and horses that are 4 or 5, they're the sort of ages where if you're just taking a very rough physiological look at horses, that's the age when they should be peaking physically.
Yeah. So you get this matchup of generations, and that's what you should be getting. And like you said, you the other day, Hookham. Oh, where's he found that from? It's going
he always had it.
It's kind of been coming, hasn't it? Yeah.
He's a funny old sock as Hookham, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, hopefully we see him again, because it would be a shame it would be a shame not to see him again, even though he bows out on a fantastic performance potentially.
True.
Other things to mention from the weekend at Epsom. Always nice to notice something after the race, but Andrea Azzini, 4 from 5 in the handicap for Roger Varian, then he won on Royal Champion. Of course, it was 3 from 4 before that, and I looked as they crossed the line at the past winners and thought, oh, that would have been a nice winner, wouldn't it? But Andrea Azzini at the track as well, particularly, he was riding it very well. Of course, he had a good race in the Derby. What else did we take away from this weekend? Is there anything, form lines, performances, anything that you wanted to take forward for the rest of the season?
You mentioned Royal Champion. He's probably a group horse.
Wolferton?
Yeah, maybe he's in the Hunt Cup, I think, as well. They were talking about. He went from 97 or something like that, I think, didn't he? Just going back to what he did, he was 3rd in a field in last year, and I kind of thought that's a group horse. He went off about 8 for the Dante or something like that, and it all went wrong for him thereafter. But he basically won that like a horse that would be Group 3, Group 2 ability. Whether he can kind of do it in that environment and whether he can kind of sustain that.
But it's the right team, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
They do really well with those sorts of horses, don't they?
They also win the Wolferton a lot, don't they? Haven't a Dave and those colours, but there's a lot of horses.
Mountain Angel won that handicap and then won the Wolferton as well.
Exactly.
Ashman King obviously had Ascot form as
well.
well.
Enough, yeah.
But you postponed, for example, and progressed gradually into really.
Talk about your 4, 5, 6-year-olds as well. These horses that just sort of.
Well, he's an owner as well who's very strange in the sense that they always seem to be prime first time out, but they race for years and years as well, which is a rare combination.
Yeah, what's that stare of his? It went off favourite for the Eborn, his reappearance just about. Something Prince.
Fujairah Prince.
Prince, a favourite. Yeah, he just turned up once or twice. Yeah, but he's brilliant fresh, so they bring him out fresh.
What did you take from last week?
I think I'd bring out, but we're going to talk. You wanted to talk about Stone Age at one point, didn't you? And talk about whether he stayed. I just don't think he fancied Epsom at all. No. He's a big galoot, isn't he? And it's all his form's all at flat galloping tracks.
Again, that's on the drop-down menu, isn't it? Big galoot,
galoot. His form's all at flat galloping tracks. His family's form are all at flat galloping tracks. A big lanky thing. He hung into the Crisford horse as he was starting to fade and he got eased off. He's a horse that might bounce back from that, actually. But I just don't think he fancied the track myself.
Okay, so that's what you're taking for the stone. You just put a line through the.
I would put a line through it rather than get down on it, to be honest.
Because the way you went at Leopardstown, he kept going and going and going, and it wasn't like I said, it wasn't a Desert Crown acceleration. It was a gradual pummeling.
But Leopardstown's a bit like that. Leopardstown from the Fire Bend is just a gradual, slow climb. So it really suits grinders that are battering their opposition into the ground.
Yeah,
like a tent peg.
So a Irish champion or something.
He could even be, Westover's going to go off shorter than him for the Irish Derby.
Yeah.
When I think it might underplay the possibility that he might reverse the form or something. I don't know, but I just thought he was one that you can definitely excuse that one.
Okay. I quite liked Bashkarova. I thought that was a really impressive performance, winning the... I can never remember. Princess Elizabeth? Princess Margaret. Princess Elizabeth.
Princess Elizabeth.
Yeah. Bashkarova, beat Potapova, beat the form horses, I thought, but in a time and a manner that I thought, my God, have you ever seen a... No, it's not the Windsor Forest anymore. They keep changing.
Yeah, the Duke of Cambridge.
Duke of Cambridge. Have you ever seen a more Duke of Cambridge performance than that? Obviously, comes from a wonderful family. The Grand Dame won the coronation and was a proper Group 1 performer. But you're thinking, Ascot and proper Newmarket. She's already won at Newmarket as well. Next couple of seasons, I think you're potentially looking at a multiple Group 1 winner there.
Well, absolutely, because if you're an older mare, a miling mare, you've got so many options, haven't you?
That Duke of Cambridge is... If you could pick a horse to win a race, it'd be one of the races you'd try and get after, wouldn't it?
Definitely.
It's definitely on the softer side.
Because then you get you can go to the Falmouth, which is quite a soft Group 1. You end up in the Sun Chariot's quite a soft Group 1. It's a division that you could...
a crack at the Lockins, you've probably got one horse to beat next year.
Look at what Lady Beauthorpe did. She would go and win all those races against the mares and the fillies, and then why not have a crack against the colts? And she'd run second or third, and everybody would be on their chairs clapping her. But in reality, she was just a well-placed 120 horse.
Yeah. Which we'd settle for, I think.
I think we would all settle for a well-placed 120 horse, wouldn't we?
But yeah, I thought she'd been beaten twice. I think she got into that classic Goodwood racing off the home bend mistake, and 10 furlong soft ground back in at Doncaster was a nightmare. So apart from that, she's won every other start, which keep mentioning is something people don't give enough credit for. Horses that win keep on winning. Okay, so that pretty much summarises last week, I think, unless there's anything else. Any curveballs?
No.
Now it's time for this week's hot list. Who has been hot but not who has been not? That's for the cold list over the past 7 days of flat racing. Trainers, jockeys and racers. Starting off with this week's hot trainer, Charlie Hills, banging him in left, right and centre. The reduction in the Shadwell horses haven't affected his strike rate. If anything, it's got even better. 8 winners from 25 runners over the past 2 weeks at the time of recording, including a tasty double on Saturday afternoon. So keep an eye on Charlie Hills' runners over the next week or so. In terms of hot jockey, Ben Curtis has been having a good time up north, maybe not necessarily taking the headlines at the fancy southern tracks and the feature races at Epsom, but he did have 5 winners in the past 7 days, including a treble at Doncaster on Saturday afternoon. So Ben Curtis is sure to be in red hot form with the likes of Hamilton and York this week, so keep an eye out for his rides. In terms of hot racers, none more so than Golden Spice, who won nicely for George Margesson at Newmarket a few weeks ago and has since followed up at Leicester. Truly Acclaimed finished second and has gone in at York. Hodler beat Adjudicator out of that race at Goodwood the other day. And Leanne Gull-Hope, who was well beaten, finished a good second at Ayr and is entered again this week, as is Truly Acclaimed. So keep an eye on those two for making that form even hotter. And could Golden Spice turn up in that valuable fillies handicap at Newmarket for the July meeting? And the 3-year-old handicap won by Showtime Mahomes on the Sunday series at York the other day for Grant Tuer has worked out very well indeed. Devast has come out and won cosily. Bay Breeze was heavily backed and also scored last week. And even Matisse broke the maiden tag comfortably a few days ago. Natalie was beaten on the line as well. It looks red hot form. That is going to be tested at Kempton. Latin Lover is entered at Kempton this week. There's also a couple from that race. The 3rd and the 4th go to Hamilton. And of course that big 3-year-old sprint at York this Saturday is sure to be full of horses who came out of this contest. Now, normally in this part of the show, we would get stuck into the weekend's action, pick out things from maybe a Thursday night card or a Friday night and see what we could dig out. But it is that strange time of year in between Epsom and Ascot. Not that this weekend isn't good. You've got your Sandowns, your Yorks, your Chesters. There are some very, very good races indeed. But of course, it is all turning towards 5 days at Royal Ascot next week. We're going to have a little bit of a primer for that. But before we do, there are a couple of things we should mention from this weekend in the projections section. First off, the first 7 furlong 2-year-old race, which I'm sure Matt is chomping at the bit to get stuck into. At Haydock this weekend, Juan Elcano has won that. Of course, future Group 2 placed animal and potentially still better this season. And Al Baha won that very impressively for the Godolphin boys last year. And of course, he's already a Group 1 winner, and we haven't seen much of him on the track either. So it does have a bit of a pedigree. So do have a look at that first 7 furlong juvenile race at Haydock. And on Saturday, it's another York meeting. They seem to have one every other week, don't they, on the Navy's Mire? Saturday at York. Good luck if you go in. Do take a spare pair of shoes. And a couple of paracetamol, I imagine, as well. If you go to York on a Saturday, so it's a fun but lively place, that's for sure. And we have a huge 3-year-old sprint handicap there, which has got a rich history of producing very hot future winners. You've been doing the sprinters, Keith. You're physically buzzing. I can feel the energy coming off you.
Yeah, so when I started doing the sprinters, right, I wasn't, so because the 2-year-olds come out and you get these early types, I wasn't certain the extent to which, the 3-year-olds are really progressive and you want to be with them, because I had previously focused on middle distance and staying races, and obviously at those distances, the 3-year-olds are the most progressive by quite a way.
Yeah.
I've been surprised the extent to which the 3-year-old sprinters stand out a mile. I knew it sort of happened a bit, but it's no different to longer distances. The 3-year-olds are just still going on and having the measure of their older horses. And the 3-year-old handicaps have almost always been strong. You just talked about earlier in the hot list a really hot 3-year-old handicap that's come through. And this race here is the form's represented up and down, but also in there is Ingertor, who won that race at the Guineas meeting extremely impressively. Looked a really, really good horse that day. Maybe not so certain York's his track, but I'd be surprised if he wasn't a listed class sprinter in time. And the history shows you sort of need to be that a little bit for this race. Twilight Sun won it in 2015, and he went on to win the Sprint Cup that year because he was one of those 3-year-olds that always seem to win the Sprint Cup at Haydock. But there's lots of other horses. Last year's form, the winner has gone on to do quite well. Forgetting the name of the horse. First Folio. He's listed.
It hasn't quite had the time to progress that race, but yeah. No. But Mr.
Blackrod's he's won good handicaps. He was second in the race last year. Maggie's been running in good races and all at York all the while since.
Well, Blackrod's your classic dot. Yeah, he'll be a Dakota Gold in a season or two.
And he is still improving. He won that race very well at the Guineas meeting. So it's form that, because the sprinters, they do keep getting faster as they get older too, it can be slow burning improve our form. I love those races. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about races that there's X amount and X time out winners, but a race where horses have ended up good 6 months, a year down the line, I love spotting them in novice handicap chases, and I love now spotting them on the flat as well. Getting these early races that keep being strong for a year.
I think you have to contextualise those a little bit. You're talking about like the principles being of interest for top-end handicaps, listed races. These races are so deep. Like, look at, it's going to be a big field. Look at like 8th backwards.
It creates a selection bias.
Yeah. But for horses that are going to come out and run in 0 to 80s, 0 to 85s, and you're thinking, that is streets ahead of what's going to be required to win one of those. So they're not just interested at the top end; they're interested in all the way down as well.
Yeah. Well, you get horses like King's Lynn, for example, who's this season might progress into a genuine Group 1 sprinter, and like I said, Michael Dodds has history of taking his sweet time with them in a really good way. So so a cracking 3-year-old handicap at York on Saturday, very much the order of the day. And it might well be paying to keep an eye on that. Probably a better pieces of form than maybe the Sandy Lane Stakes over the past few seasons. Those kind of races.
Sandy Lane's a very, very strong race. I mean, I was looking at the Palace of Holyrood House Handicap. At Royal Ascot. Art Power won it the first year, but last year's run hasn't worked out massively brilliantly.
Is that the ground probably than anything
else?
As
much as that, yeah. And when you go to Ascot, it becomes a draw race.
Yeah.
And all that sort of carry on. So this race has stood up in the face of that.
And I love 3-year-old handicaps all over them like a rash. Which don't even get me started on the Britannia. Oh, what a race! especially if you, like I said, are buying horses for Hong Kong. But speaking of the Britannia, Royal Ascot, day one. First off, is there any point taking Baid on at all, or do we just watch him to see what he does? How do you approach races with unknown foreign quantities like the King's Stand? And what factors will decide Coribus versus Native Trail? Because currently it's so top-heavy towards Coribus, and there's a possibility that it's because they won't both run, obviously. But they're the three things that I thought on day one that were most interesting to get an angle on now.
Well, with Baid, now we've got Desert Crown. Like
You're over Baid, are you?
Not over him, but he's won the Lockins very well. He's run to that high figure. I'm not certain he's got an awful lot more on top of that high figure potentially. He's already run at 130 plus.
Yep.
He's not an all-timer, is he?
Probably not. He sort of teases it a little bit.
Does a bit, but now we're waiting for him to take on a monster. He's not going to meet that monster at a mile. He needs to step up, make it happen. Jump on.
So for next week, it's
just watch him. He'll win He'll beat the same horses. He'll beat them half the track. Real World, is he going to run? Because he's a good horse.
Yeah.
And it's whether they place him to win a Group 1 instead of placing it with Chase Baid's backside.
I sort of hope that Baid continues to hack up and look really good, and then he makes a price for Desert Crown.
That's the hope.
That's the hope. Yeah.
Your second one as well, it got me thinking, that one about Golden Pal and the King's Stand. These sort of horses rarely take up too little of the book.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Exactly. They're always priced up. You look at it, and it's priced up as if you're going to get the best of America and Australia and France and wherever turning up, and they're going to be in some sort of Red Arrows formation. Yeah. The finest sprinters of this generation from around the globe.
I mean, Wesley Ward's the best hype man since Flavor Flav as well.
Yeah.
59.83 for 5 furlongs. That's quite fast.
Yeah. Get him in the Norfolk. But yeah, obviously, I mean, Lady Aurelia aside to an extent, a lot of them, come over and you go, oh, is that it? Especially since Australians stopped coming over for reasons we probably
also they're not. Show. Well, yeah. But also, I mean, our sprinters aren't as bad as they were then. When the Australians could send over anything and beat, it was like the American turf horses. We could send over Group 2 horses and win American turf races.
Well, because the breeding's got faster.
The breeding's got faster. Our sprinters are better now.
And Coribus versus Native Trail, because of that one, you think you think the gap's going to widen?
Yeah. I struggle to envisage Native Trail getting any better than he is now, and I think Coribus will do.
I know it's not the ethos of this show, but I want to make you scrum a bit. Does Native Trail win another Group 1?
There are some bad ones that he could run in, I suppose. Maybe. He probably, he wouldn't have to be much better than he is to win another one, like a weaker one, but...
True enough.
No.
Okay.
Well, there's 4, 5... You go to France for 12 Group 1s over a mile, can't you? So it'll be one of those. Okay, fair enough. Day 2, Bay Bridge, obviously. Fascinating throughout the week. God, can't wait.
I'm going to tell everybody why you're so delighted about Bay Bridge, because you talked about him after he won the London Gold Cup, and producer Dan, bless him, dug out a clip of you talking him up on RP Live.
Yeah. That's the problem. Yeah, I forgot that went in the pilot last week, which didn't get broadcast. But yeah, because I said, he could be the next, like a Harbinger type. And you went, yeah, but you didn't say it the day, like at Newbury, did you? And I went, I bloody did.
I still didn't believe it until I saw it either.
Yeah.
I was saying it before the race almost as well. And I mean, Dave Autumn was like, what are you talking about? It's Harbinger, are you absolutely sure? So I'm hoping, there's a Desert Crown, Bay Bridge, Harbinger workforce scenario.
And what's really good is that there's no sense that Stout's going to avoid them. You wouldn't keep them apart. It's not what he does. He runs the horse in the right race.
Yeah.
And if the right race for Bay Bridge is the right horse for Desert Crown, Bay Bridge versus Desert Crown is going to happen.
Which begs the question, why do we do it? Why don't we just go down to Stout's Gallops? Do it now.
Yeah, let's have it now.
Yeah, let's get involved.
Tenner in. Get off at that.
Yeah, I'll put a tenner in.
Yeah. Get him on the phone. Sir Michael, hello? Who's this? Never you mind. But is it going to be, because obviously Crystal Ocean, Poet's Word, both, mishmashed over 10 and 12. Is that going to be the case of Bay Bridge? And if you ran him next week, 10 or 12?
What we've got so far is I think they've kind of gone the wrong way for me. I think Bay Bridge is going to be a better 1.5 mile horse, and I think I'm fairly convinced they're willing to be proven wrong, that Desert Crown's going to be a better mile and a quarter horse.
So, but do you think that's going to unfold next week, or is that going to be a lesson they learn? Are they going to come on the show and go, one lesson that Sir Michael learned?
But yeah.
Well, the Prince of Wales is potentially a cheap Group 1 for Bainbridge, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's often actually not. I mean, I always say it's not that good, and then I look at it and go, actually, it's not as bad as I've made out here.
There've been some,
but there's been some stinkers.
Yeah.
So it might be seen as a cheap Group 1 you can get in.
He did show a lot of speed in that Brigadier Gerard, a lot more speed. Like, thinking back to him last year, I thought that was going to kind of come to fruition over a mile and a half, whereas there was a lot of speed at Sandown, a lot more than I'd sort of given him credit for. So, yeah.
Bearing in mind what I said about Bashka Rover earlier as well, we should probably look at last year's fillies because you're alcohol-free, you're Snow Lantern, your Mother Earths. It was a really exciting division last year, but the question is, how are they going to progress this year? And alcohol-free in particular seemed to really respond to Oisin Murphy's riding style last year. 2 runs so far, she's looked a bit difficult.
She's not like the same horse, has she? I sort of started to wonder. She had a pretty hard campaign last year.
Yeah,
she was on the go a long time. She ran in some tough races. I sort of think that might have just left its mark a bit.
Every chance. If you were looking for a bit of debris to hold on to in the wash, it's that her 2 big performances last year. She wasn't even that consistent last year, and her 2 big performances both came on softer ground.
Yeah.
So maybe hang on to that one a little bit, but I would be inclined to think the same as you. I think there's every chance that she's just not gone on.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. And Patrick Toomey, I think, is a trainer who is, Pearls Galore in particular, on the verge of being, one of those interesting trainers where you kind of back all his runners when he puts them in at the right grade, because he's not wasting any bullets, is he? How good is he?
27. I was surprised by this. 27% strike rate the last 5 years. That's Appleby Haggis sort of numbers. Fewer runners, but fair play for placing them. Yeah, absolutely.
And most of the fillies and mares as well. So it's just whether he's really exploiting the programme book in Ireland, or whether he is ready to burst onto a bigger scene. I'd be interested to see. In terms of day 3, of course, for Royal Ascot next week, the Gold Cup will be taking centre stage. A couple of things for that. One, Kyprios suddenly promoted to the top of the betting. Obviously, people with the Ballydoyle stayers in the back of their mind, which hasn't been for a few years, but they think, the next Yates and all that jazz. Is he genuinely one of those, or is he another victim of the hype machine? And will the staying division be weaker or more interesting when Stradivarius bows out?
It'll be both.
There we go. Job done. Moving on, day 4.
It'll definitely be weaker, but it will be more interesting. What Stradivarius has done, he's been like Toto pulling back the curtain a little bit. He's shown you what these staying races are.
Yeah.
They are who can settle for 1 mile and 6 and then sprint for 2 furlongs.
Yeah.
Because he can do that, and it's won him 20 odd races. And that's what the guy who follows him will have to do.
Yeah.
He probably won't be as good as Stradivarius. Yeah. Certainly not in terms, because Stradivarius was basically a Group 2/Group 1 mile and a half horse that settled.
Yeah.
And we're unlikely to get the legs of him coming up to follow in his footsteps.
You were doing the stayers last year.
Yeah.
Is the emergence of Kyprios a surprise?
Slightly. He's always had that sense of a horse that was going to keep getting better, and you don't actually have to get that much better than a handicapper to reach that level. Trushan, champion stayer last year, ran in the Northumberland Plate, finished 6th. He ran within a couple of pounds of his top mark to finish 6th. So
he was carrying 38 stone, I think.
He was carrying loads of weight.
He was carrying us 3 on his back.
But with that, there wouldn't be a horse couldn't finish 6th in a Wokingham and then win a sprint cup, and you go, I was only £2 in that. No matter, you don't get that's even though we think of sprinters being that close.
Wasn't Rohan last year? Was Rohan the top rated sprinter?
For about 10 minutes.
Well, yeah, but 10 minutes is enough, isn't it?
Yeah, and he never. That was the end of him, wasn't it? He's not really run a good race since then, has he?
No.
That was the end of all that. But there isn't the level for the sprinters. That's why it'll be weaker when Stradivarius goes, because he's the only proper Group 1 horse in town. Really. Yeah. So it will be weaker, but it'll be more interesting because we get to find out who's the next big boy.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that the headline when he bows out is a history of violence. That's what I'm going for. Some post-edit.
Did you see that they put the ad for his stallion page in the post, and they had to quote sectionals because it's all they've got really?
Yeah. I think so Kyprios is. I've gone from thinking he's a bit of a yak to probably quite a good stayer, but the Stradivarius point is my worry with him. Because I don't think he's that sort of horse that's going to quicken in the same way.
Yeah, you're right.
It's going to be a very kind of different way going about it.
To be fair, DXB used to always finish second to Stradivarius, and he was just a roller who went out, and because he was a well-placed roller, he got quite a bit of joy, and you might find that Kyprios does that.
Maybe, yeah.
And the Ribblesdale, of course, is we talk about the Oaks and whatnot. I mean, on paper, the Ribblesdale's always a confusing race. Then when you look back and it's Gosden again.
Last 6 years, my first thing was, it's easy. O'Brien and Gosden,
But I can understand why it happens with O'Brien, because it's the same bloodlines over and over again, and maybe it's starting to go that way a little bit with Gosden, but it's not really, is it? You know, breeding, owners, it's almost, he keeps doing it in the Oaks and the Ribblesdale, but with completely different darts.
I sort of think of the Ribblesdale as almost like not quite ability versus potential, if you know what I mean. So you're talking
I don't know what you mean. No.
So sort of like almost like slightly below Div 1 fillies versus the fillies that haven't shown all they've got yet, which is why it gets a little bit confusing, because you're dealing with like maiden, novice form, and then
it's the Europa Conference League, is what you're saying.
Well, essentially, yeah.
But fillies and mares are, especially middle distance ones these days, where they're not as in fashion in terms of breeding purposes. Yeah. There just aren't that many good ones to go around. And that's why you'll find the Ribblesdale some years is rubbish, because there just weren't enough good ones that year to cover an Oaks and the Ribblesdale to any real. In some years, you know, because Gosden does get a lot of those, you know, Oppenheimer, those prominent owner breeder types that have those stout bloodlines. Frankly, Darling won this race, didn't she? And all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, but you got your Oppenheimers. Obviously, you've got your. The owners are going to go out of my head because we've been talking for so long, but your Nashville owners, your the Swiss Dream owners, all those different bloodlines, and then obviously Shadwell horses, and there are so many colliding bloodlines. Yet Gosden every single year goes, that's the Oaks one, that's the Ribblesdale one. He seems to just know. Whereas, like I said, I can see what happening in O'Brien, because they're almost like it's a well-oiled machine every year. They keep the same kind of horses coming back.
When you've got 80 horses that match that description, the easiest thing is just to do what you did with the half-sister or the dam.
But Gosden doesn't necessarily.
Is it just he's really good at picking his best filly and then going, well, that one's probably good enough to win a Ribblesdale?
Is it just he's really good?
Yes,
Which one's a bit more forward? That one?
Okay, day 4, a couple of things to answer. Is the Commonwealth Cup the best thing to happen to horse racing since sliced bread? Which doesn't make sense. And last year's coronation winner, first British train winner since 2014. Why did the Irish and the French come over and beat up our mile fillies?
Well, I had a look at this actually, and since Rosina, who won it in 2014, obviously there's only none until last year, and I think it's just a calendar thing. Like, I think 4 times the 1,000 Guineas winner turned up in the Coronation Stakes, and all but one of them, which was Billisden Brook, who, bless her, but she wasn't the best Guineas winner you'll ever find. They'd all run in another race in between. There's too much time between, and the French Guineas happens in mid-May. There are no races for mile fillies. You don't want to go the Diane route. There's no races for you if you've got that pre-Sandringham that was on Sunday there. That's your only option at Group 2 or Group 1 level.
Right. Okay.
After the Pouliche, before. So the French in particular have a good record in the Coronation. It's because it's a natural race for them. In Ireland, it's a little bit the same. You know, it's a more natural timing for Ascot than the Guineas. But Winter did there's mostly O'Brien horses, to be honest. Last year's did it, Mother Earth.
Yep.
But they all ran in races in between. They all went to the Irish Guineas or the French Guineas in between, because there's just too much of a gap. You've got to make hay with these fillies at that point in the season if you're not going up in trip with them.
Okay.
So it just ends up, it's a quirk of the calendar.
The problem is you've answered that question really well. And the other question is about the Commonwealth Cup, which you're also a sprint king as well. So
I'm not a sprint king. I've been doing the sprinters this year.
You're Dandy Nichols.
I'm definitely not Dandy Nichols. Well, there's a bit more like it. But anyway.
Matt, you can go on for this bit.
It's the 5th classic now, isn't it?
Love it.
The Commonwealth Cup is the 5th classic. Can you tell me that the St Ledger's a more important race than that?
No.
A 3-year-old Group 1?
No.
Of course it's
Not
not.
now.
Commonwealth Cup's the 5th Classic. It's a great race. It is what it is.
Do we need to move it then? We need to move it later in the year so it's got its own prominent position.
We need to get more trials for it. We need to build up more sandy lanes and.
But if we move it, we'll get more trials for it, won't we?
Yeah, I'm not sure we need to move it, to be honest. I never really thought about that too much, but
Is it such a good race that actually it should have a day on its own? You have a day with its Sun Chariot has a day on its own, for example.
it's the Coronation Stakes Day, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah.
And it's a better race than that.
Yeah.
It should be in the Coronation. If anything, you should maybe be about 40 minutes earlier and swap places. But it's something like all but one of the winners of one Open Age Group 1, and we all know the stats by now, and it's the most obvious idea in the world now.
We all know the stats right now.
Looking 7 years on from when it was inaugurated, you think, how did we not think of that earlier?
So
I was watching racing for 15 years and never once thought, I know what this needs.
Yeah.
And I think I'm an idiot for not realising that sooner, because it's just a great race.
Yeah. Well, we're all idiots. We're all idiots. Day 5 then. I'll come to you for this, Matt. How good is last year's middle distance 3-year-old form? Obviously, your Hurricane Lanes and your ADRs. Creative Force, obviously, I think is getting kind of forgotten about a little bit. Winning a Jersey, bolted up at Ascot at the back end of last season. Is he potentially a sprinting superstar? And we've already answered this question, but do you have to be a group horse to win a sprint handicap? Yes, you do. So last year's middle distance 3-year-old form and Creative Force, please, Matt.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Creative Force yet. I had a flick through that jersey and it wasn't great. There's not kind of masses come out of it and you think, oh, that was a strong race. And you watch that champion sprint that he won, it was track position and ride really as much as anything that kind of won it. I'm not convinced that he's that kind of sort of top level sprinter. Yeah, he might be, and if he does it under different circumstances, then fair enough. But
he could just be an Ascot horse, which is a great thing to have.
Yeah, potentially. Which, like you say, it all ties into those big races, doesn't it? And it sort of fits his program as well. So
the Creative Force. You watch that race at Ascot and you think, is it a bit of late season nonsense? You get some of these late season bits of form that are rubbish. But the form of it's actually working. There's some horses that were quite well beat that day have come out and run some big races subsequent to that. So I'm starting to believe.
Well, there was two. There were two. I mean, it's terrible after time. It's not after time. I backed the first and second. I had 2 bets in that. Backed the first and second because they were well clear. So for me, I was like, those two have the standout Ascot form in particular. And so I kind of thought, oh, this makes sense actually. 2 best horses to finish first and second, even though the prices didn't necessarily say that was the case. Okay, we're going on a bit, but we'll have a quick word on the juveniles, of course, because we've got a whole host of 2-year-old races throughout the week. I absolutely love getting stuck into them and then banging my head against the brick wall when Dig 2 happens from last year and gets beaten on the far side by something else. But that's what you get with the Ascot juvenile form. They're exciting. They lure you in. There we go. Easy for you to say. But I mean, even now they're a difficult kind of bunch to work out, Matt, but kind of exciting and difficult. So is there anything that stands out for you so far that you think, okay, we're expecting a big performance? Yeah,
I mean, the probably the standout bit of form is that Noble Style Ascot win. Look at Wild Bank, Redemption Time and Royal Scotsman, that Goodwood winner. They've all come out and won since, and it was super impressive. So that's kind of the bit of form that you can say, well, that's worked out really well so far. But he's not the only exciting juvenile. I think we're dealing with a really strong crop. Blackbeard, Little Big Bear, they're both ahead of Noble Style on RPRs. And it's a case of trying to work out where they're going to go. Obviously, you're more focused on performance up until this point, whereas now you're trying to go 6 furlongs, 5 furlongs. The 7 furlong one, I think Alfred Munnings, that almost writes itself a little bit.
And whatever wins at Haydock this week maybe turns up.
Yeah, quite possibly. But that he ran over 7 furlongs on the 13th of May, I think it was. Really early compared to what we get in the UK. Really impressive that day, and he kind of looked just an obvious Chesham one. The one that has stood out for me, just flicking through the prices and stuff, is Wild Bank in Norfolk. Mm-hmm. He came out of that Noble Style race, bolted up in a small field race at York, really good time, just looks an out-and-out 5 furlong horse. And I don't think that price sort of factors in how good he potentially is at that trip. But yeah, really exciting bunch.
York form though, because there's again I forgot the name again, but the Archie Watson.
Bradsell.
Yeah, that's also. My God, that was impressive.
Yeah.
But is it Mum's Tipple all over again?
Mate, I'm less sort of keen to think that with him and Wildbank. There was another juvenile race, I can't remember who won it, but that was a race where I thought, oh, that's just a York race. The first two have come miles clear, and you're thinking, no. But I think Wildbank and maybe Bradsell, that was another good time for that race. They could be proper 5 furlong horses. So.
I'm going to wrap this up then with this one. All the things we've mentioned at Ascot. What is the one angle? It doesn't have to be specific, but what is the one angle you're trying to remember next week?
One angle I'll try to remember next week. Don't get too involved in handicaps because I always say, it's just high. It's just high. It's fine. Get some pace in that, and satisfy myself with some pace with a 2 at the start of its stall, and I'm happy. But there's always I will get heavily involved in the one race if that doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So the handicaps are dead competitive. They're very valuable to you later in the season.
Yeah. These
handicaps at Ascot as well. So don't just think you need to get the winner on the day. It'll give you a winner subsequently. So don't get too excited.
Okay. Matt?
One of my favourite things to do is post Ascot, go back. The straight course races are a little bit more obvious if you're on the wrong side or something like that. The round track, positioning's key there, and you get a lot of horses that just have no sort of race kind of back in the wash somewhere, whether it's trouble.
Bullard up the line, at the inside, don't they? On that?
Whether it's
double figures again. It's classic. I mean, even every year people say, kind of, there's still a debate of it, but then you'll get 16 beats 15 beats 18 beats 17. I mean, last year there was I can't remember exactly which handicap it was, but it was pretty much 4 of the 6 widest stalls, first 4 in a handicap, which and they're still going off 7, 8, 9, 10 to 1 rather than 7 to 2.
Is it because the bends at Ascot are all over very quickly? So it's not because the bends are all over very quickly.
That mile and a quarter run to the first bend is pretty short as well.
Yeah, that's true.
So if but they're angled, aren't they? So if you're wide, you've got a more direct route, I think.
I'm just trying to think from a person. So I do a park run near me, and it's a pretty brutal. It's a stiffer finish than Ascot, and I always. The first time I did it, I was exhausted going up that hill, and now I've become the person you hate at the park run.
No, you're not.
Who accelerates past 5 people up the hill because I know it's happening, and there's a downhill bit, and I always swing wide, and I power up the hill, if I couldn't get in to that rhythm and swing wide and get into that rhythm up the hill, you can't sprint, you can't take off. So I think it's literally the motion of the horses coming wide. You can get into that rhythm, whereas on the inside you have to manoeuvre. They're so competitive, and it's such a stiff finish that every false move and bit of energy you use on the inside, I think, to get your position, to unleash your run, somebody's already got 10 strides on you on the wide outside. Yeah. I think that plays a big part.
It's a relatively short run as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not
2.5, 2.75 furlongs, something like that.
So that's what I mean. You don't get, if you get stopped, it counts twice as much, I think, almost, because not only do you have to then switch and get your run, but someone else has already gone past you, and it's not like you don't have a class edge. You have to have things drop right. Should be an exciting week. We won't be here for it because there's no point analysing things while the dust settles, while the dust is still choking you.
At the time we'd be recording this next week, Liz would be picking out her hat, wouldn't she? So there's no real point in doing it now.
Okay. Well, I hope you enjoy Royal Ascot. We sure will. And hopefully everything we've said is 100% correct. Now to wrap up this week's Flat Pack, it's the moment you've all been waiting for, but you didn't know it yet. It's time for everyone's brand new favourite game show. It's Beat Keith, everybody! Cue music. Yeah, we'll put that in the edit. That's right, Beat Keith, ladies and gentlemen, is the Racing Post brand new game show inspired by the one and only Mr. Bruce Forsyth, who's with us here in spirit for today's show, whereby the Quizmaster becomes the contestant. That's right, Dave Orton once dubbed Keith Melrose the Quizmaster, and you've been living it down ever since, Keith.
I don't think I ever will.
No, you don't think you ever will. But this is it, a brand new game show named in your honour.
I mean, I should be flattered.
But
I want to die.
Matt Gardner, are you ready for Beat Keith?
Yeah, I'm ready. Knowing what sort of questions you might ask now, I've been swatting up Things like what did
he's not.
what did John Gosden have for breakfast when Kingman won the St James's Palace, all that sort of
I
stuff.
think you'll find it was 3 hash browns.
Yeah.
There is a possibility that in the 2 pilot episodes I've made this way too hard. But hopefully we can find the balance in between, and we'll work out whether the difficulty needs to be higher or lower. Now, the order of the day: 5 questions, 5 categories, question for each, and they are in theory based around the week's racing, but increasingly obscure, I'm sure, as the season goes on. So, Keith, do you want to have the question 1 or question 2 in each subject?
I'll go first, please.
You'll go first. Okay. Please pray silence for Beat Keith. Okay. First subject: Keith Melrose. Can we use that? It's probably copyright. This is about the weekend's racing. The subject is trailed in last.
Right.
Desert Crown, an impressive winner of this year's Epsom Derby. But who trailed in last?
I backed him. I backed him each way. I think it was Walk of Stars.
It was Walk of Stars. Walk of Stars. That's as many points as you got in last week's pilot episode in the first one.
Yes.
That's the first smile I've seen from you.
Yeah, exactly. I've talked about I like Droopy the dog, but see if I win, I'll be on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, same question to you, Matt Gardner. Tuesday won the Oaks, but who trailed in last?
Oh God. No idea.
Gonna have to rush you. No, not even a guess?
No, I can't even have a guess.
You don't even have a guess?
No.
Keith, do you know?
No, I don't actually.
Wow. There's a clue in that one. It was With the Moonlight.
Oh, the other Godolphin thing. Yeah.
Far too keen, didn't get home. Okay, 1-0 to Keith then after the first question. Okay, the second one is I like this one, but you're going to hate me for it. Distance beat. Distance beat. Okay, from Epsom last week, Keith. Swilcan Bridge beat Grenoble by, I think it was half a length in the 3-year-old handicap. But how far is it from Swilcan Bridge on St Andrews Golf Course in Scotland to the city of Grenoble in southeast France?
This is unlikely, but I've been to both those places.
Right. How long did it take you?
I didn't go from one to the other. 10 years between. So Swilcan is so hold on. Is this as a crow flies?
Yeah.
Right.
As a crow walks, according to Google.
Well, he walks, does he?
Yeah.
Must be about 1,000 miles.
It's 1,003 miles.
I must be getting it. Must be getting
absolutely getting it. Absolutely getting it. 2 to Keith Melrose. That was a good one. Okay. Similar to you. Bashkirova, named after Elena Bashkirova, beats Potapova, named after Anastasia Potapova, 1.5 lengths. But how far is it between the birthplaces of both real-life counterparts? Bashkirova, born in Moscow, Potapova in Saratov, both in Russia, of course.
It's going to be really, really big or really small, couldn't it? No idea.
That's the quiz.
1,500 miles.
Oh, he went the wrong way. It's 528 miles.
You are a vicious swine.
Yeah. We have to turn this around one week, don't we?
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Just get your own back, get Gunjim from last week.
But I've got to be honest, Keith is enjoying this now, he's winning. I'll be honest with you.
Sorry, but is it that transparent?
Yes. You're grinning from ear to ear. Okay, third subject. What's in a name? Keith Melrose. Tuesday won the Oaks on her birthday, but what day was she actually born on?
Right, so she's 3, born 2019, there's 1 leap year, so it's Thursday. So Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday. Monday?
It was a Monday! It was a Monday.
I'm just saying a day, if that's me.
Absolutely. This is why you're losing, Matt.
Is it? Yeah.
Okay. Tuesday was born in June, Matt Gardner. But her counterpart in the race, Thoughts of June, was born in what month?
May.
Oh, it was April. Oh, sorry, Matt Gardner. You should have worked it
Should have done all of this and all. Yeah, that would have done it.
What did I tell you? Okay, 3-0 to Keith Melrose. Unbelievable. Who can beat Keith? Nobody. Now we're actually going to broadcast this. He's stepped up his game. The Derby. All right, we'll continue talking about Keith. Desert Crown, given an RPR of 124 for winning on Saturday. Can you name the 2 other horses who were also given 124 in the past 10 years? A point for each.
Wings of Eagles.
No.
Last 10 years. 1, 2, 4. Harzand.
Harzand was one of them. Point for you. The other one was Adayar last year.
He's only 124.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. Here we go for you, Matt Gardner. Can you name the 2 horses who bettered that as an RPR in the Derby in the past 10 years?
Golden Horn.
Golden Horn was one.
Australia.
Australia was the other. Okay, pulls a couple of points back there. So it is currently 4-2 to Keith Melrose. So you've already won, Keith, unless you somehow managed to break the rules. I don't know. But the final question is about Ascot next week. Keith Melrose, first race of the Ascot card, of course, is the Queen Anne. Palace Pier won that at odds of 2-7 last year, but who finished second?
Just picking out all the rags that have finished second to Palace Pier, isn't it? Even though I know this was a lockage, I'm going to say Lady Bowthorpe.
It was Lope Fernandez.
Oh, yeah.
The recalcitrant lad. Matt, Oxford won the King's Stand, but who finished second?
No idea.
Arecibo.
Yeah.
It's Arecibo.
Really? Yeah.
Which, if you combine the silks you were wearing, probably makes Tom Morley's colours, I think.
Yeah.
That's how we get around for it. Okay, there we go. 4-2. 4-2, Keith. You have not been beaten this week.
It's a high-scoring affair for once.
Congratulations.
You've done a bit better there.
Thank you. You win
I win Brewster.
a framed picture of Bruce Forsyth, but please bring him back next week.
I will try.
Okay, there we go. Beat Keith, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to beat Keith, come to Leeds Tuesday morning. Knock on the door.
Bring a friend.
We'll see if
He wins one, and that's it.
That's it. Look at him. Absolute filth. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us for the inaugural Flat Pack. Enjoyed it? Yeah. You have now.
I can't wait to get out with these silks.
Yeah.
I'm feeling very self-conscious.
Well, he is. He's having, imagine how Matt feels. Not only is he wearing the silks, he's just been heavily beaten.
That wasn't that bad.
It was very predictable, though, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
What was that?
The heavy beating.
Was it?
Yeah.
I got a draw last week.
We'll have to give a weight allowance potentially next week. But that's it. Thanks for joining us. The Flat Pack will not be returning next week because it'll be Royal Ascot, but we'll return the week after for a 7-hour show going through every single race individually. Producer Dan has just smashed his head into the wall. But I've been Ross Brierley. Thank you to Keith Melrose and Matt Gardner. Goodbye.